Hello! How is everybody doing? I thought that I would try a new location today. As always, I am Sean Penalber. And today I am doing another video episode relating to my treatise of the funk and everything. This is a very special episode, as this episode, once it is finished and I put it in my treatise, I will have finished my entire third full draft of my entire treatise of very long name. And hopefully that should be published. Well, it'll always be published online and available online. But hopefully it'll be available if anyone would like a physical copy by at least my birthday this month, the 25th. So we'll see. Let's get things started. How about a quick moment of silence? Let's just sit here with each other and feel the things that we feel. Okay. Thank you for that. And if you skipped ahead, welcome back. Today is April 9th, 2023. It was a good day for me. I hope it was a great day for y'all. And if not, there's always tomorrow. Not always. Not for everyone, at least. But there will always be a tomorrow for everything. To start off, this is something I'll be adding to the introduction of the treatise to kind of hopefully bring a better sense of what we are getting into and what things we're getting into this. This also applies to the video or any video that I'm making on these subjects. It reads, "This is a semi-comprehensive collection of a completely incomplete series of thoughts whose entire purposes serves to be eventually completed by someone or something else, or not, and how it all comes together by its own unravelment." If that was too many words for you to comprehend in that collection, what I mean by that is that like most, if not all philosophers, the things and the ideas and the thoughts that I am presenting to you are, again, just that. Just a collection of thoughts. They are not complete answers, as any philosophy goes. We don't know these are as truths. They are the closest that we can get so far, but they will always be evolving. And into something else. Therefore, they are a semi-comprehensive collection. And by collection, what I mean is these are the things that, out of everything that I've come across and learned, and not just myself, but all of history and the past, I am looking into that information and trying to compile an entire theory upon all of that, because I think it all fits together no matter what it is. Everything and anything, as I have presented, is constructed of funk, made of funk, and within funk. A completely incomplete series, again, because it probably will never be finished by myself. It's something that I am presenting to others to investigate themselves and to go further with. Just like, again, any philosopher, they present these ideas or their ideas to you to expand upon in the future, and to continue to expand upon, to continue to argue and prove wrong and prove right, and go any and every direction. Sorry, I keep reading myself. Entire purpose serves to be eventually completed by someone or something else, or not, because again, you or anything does not have to complete this information, which is why I'm trying to compile as much as I can in the time that I'm allowed, and how it all comes together by its own unravelment, which to me means that essentially, like, as you unraveling a scroll, essentially, it's like you're going to learn more the more that you unravel this scroll, or to dissemble something, you're going to learn a little more by taking it apart and putting it back together and then taking it apart again. It's all going to unravel, and you're going to learn from that. And so kind of both those ways, a continuing story of how that scroll unravels and how all of this just falls apart, and we learn from that as well. The next thing I have down is a quote by Parmenides that kind of fits into this a little bit. What he says is, if you are going to reject my way of truth and believe something false, then at least believe the falsehoods that I offer in the way of opinion. And what I mean by that, I'm not going to say what he means by that. What I'm putting that here for is essentially that, like, again, like I've kind of stated, none of these things are absolute truths. You don't have to believe in them. You can believe in them in any level of spectrum to the degree that you want or decide to do. The reason, again, that I'm presenting these ideas to you are so that I myself in the future and anyone else who wants to can evolve off of these ideas and hopefully reach further truths off of them, or maybe even potentially the answer, which maybe it is a possibility, though we have very few actual answers in the entire span of humanity. There are very few actual epistemic truths and answers. And so, again, that being said, since none of this is true or false, believe what you want, but I'm asking you to take these opinions in and just have thoughts about them. Even if your thoughts is, nah, that's not for me, or I disagree, or you can agree, again, take these opinions and do what you want with them. Evolve from them. That's what I'm looking for. Because the next thing I have down is, there will always be those who are smarter, wiser, and or more able than us, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't or aren't allowed to share our perspectives. In fact, it's integrally important to existence that we each share our perspectives of our being, because that collectivity is what makes the universe not possible, but it expands the universe and teaches itself what it is like to be you. And it helps each of our understanding and the entire funk understanding of, again, what it is like for you to be yourself within this entire experience. And that is important. And so don't be afraid to speak your mind, even right or wrong. Speak your truths. And for those who are willing to listen, they will listen. And for those who are not, again, one of the terms that we've talked about, vox manolis. Take your voice and fly. Go find someone else who wants to talk about these things. Because there will and there won't be people who want to discuss this or anything with you or anyone. Another phrase that has come to me, this came to me in a dream, is Fuega Puerta. Fuega Puerta, which is Spanish for fire door. In the dream that this came to me, This is a little embarrassing to share, but it was someone that I personally have feelings for, and have for a very long time. And I was, I guess, confessing my feelings for this person, and their response was "Fuega Puerta," and I remember when I woke up, it's sticking with me and being like, "What does that mean?" Because the way that I felt it in the dream was like I understood it. Like I was like I felt the way that it wasn't like an insult, and it wasn't like someone being like, "Oh, you son of a bitch" or anything like that. It was like, "Fuega Puerta," which after it happened, I went and I asked some people in my social groups, "What do you think that this term means?" And I already had an assessment for myself, and most people basically came to the same consensus that it's basically something that's hard or difficult to enter. It's the Fuego Puerta. It's a fire door, and if you walk through a door that is fire, it's going to probably hurt a little bit, unless you find some way to go through in a fireproof way, you know. But once you're inside, it's not like everything's going to be awful and terrible. I mean, sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But it could be a Fuego Puerta is like a person or a subject that is difficult for one to enter. But once you're in, like, it's not so bad. You know, you learn. I mean, it could be, again, it could be bad or for some, or good for some, because these things are subjective to each of our perspectives. Excuse me. And also, I think it would also hurt to exit as well. Let's say you were in a wonderful relationship and it hurt to leave that relationship. That'd be the Fuego Puerta on the way out. The next thing I have down is a question that I wanted to look into on: is selfishness rewarded? And in that search, I came on a pretty interesting psychology journal about the psychopathy of altruism. And it took me 4 days to read because of all the medical terms and everything. But it was fascinating, and I learned a lot that really opened my eyes. The first thing I have written down is selfishness. When it comes to, again, is selfishness rewarded? Yes and no. Just like everything, basically. It goes on an entire spectrum. There is no black and white. There are the signs of yes and no, but there's also everything in between and beyond. Though in the study, and of the many studies, not just a study, it's many studies, and this paper combines all these studies, selfishness is more successful in pro-war societies or pro-military societies, because the people who are selfish are the ones who get farthest, and selfless people are more pro-social, whereas selfish people are antisocial, which leads into, I have this all mixed up, hopefully it makes sense. But what it leads into as well... One second. Let me gather my thoughts so I can present this in a better way. So, to branch off of that, I didn't have this written down, but to branch off of that, in pro-war societies, people are more successful when they're selfish. The studies that they had shared were... in tribal cultures in Africa and stuff, where it's more family based and people go together, altruism was showed in toddlers almost 100%, versus tribes that were more war driven, or even American kids. When it came to American kids, it was a much smaller percentage of kids showed altruism, which, take that as you want it. Another thing that came out of this was my knowledge or their knowledge to relay to me on successful and unsuccessful psychopaths. And what an unsuccessful psychopath is someone who these two branch together, but I'll share this first. An unsuccessful psychopath is the type of people that you see in jails and stuff, the criminals, the people who go crazy and cannot control their psychopathy and such, and they get caught. They are unsuccessful psychopaths. Versus successful psychopaths, which are the people that you get like global leaders or your top CEOs. And the fascinating study on this, which I thought was crazy. So, fear and distress are in the same part of the brain as empathy. And fear, distress, and empathy all come from the amygdala in your brain. And the smaller the amygdala, the more traits of one that a successful psychopath or an unsuccessful psychopath. And so people who have smaller amygdalas are less likely to fear things or be in distress or stressed out or have anxiety. But it also means that they have less empathy because they cannot relate those ideas of fear and distress. And that's why they go so far in the ranking ladder, because they're not afraid to. They're not afraid to walk around on people or climb the ladder of success or throw people down the ladder of success. And I think that's fascinating because for those of us who do feel fear and distress and empathy or have a larger, more successful amygdala, that's what we're fighting against. And it's much harder for us to get to those levels because we are up against people who don't even really feel these things. Like if you are someone who does experience fear and distress and you are up against someone who does not, you're going to have a pretty tough time going against that person, whether it's physically or a division of power, for example, which I think is fascinating. And so when it comes to is selfishness rewarded, it depends on whether you're pro-social or antisocial, and a psychopath or a non-psychopath, or a sociopath or a non-sociopath. Because selfishness will reward you to a point of like, let's break this down to like cells, right? Cells have to be selfish or else they won't make it. They'll disintegrate. But once you go beyond cells and stuff to things that can like work together, they almost need to work together in order to, and be selfless in order to thrive and function. And again, when it comes to non-pro-war societies, these societies function well because they work together as a selfless group, as more altruistic. But then that even leads into, what was the word they used? I'm just going to use extreme altruism or vain altruism, stuff like virtue signaling and stuff, like people who are doing selfless acts in their own selfishness. Sorry, I thought I froze for a second. But people who do selfless acts for selfishness, which cancels each other out, and that just equals selfishness. Even though, it is both. It's a wild world we live in. Moving on. I hope that was fun for you. But going back to that, it also talked about the power of early development. That it's so important to for kids and children to have parental figures and figures who hold them accountable and stuff. Because if they don't, many studies have shown, for example, like kids who are raised in orphanages and stuff, they are more likely to have smaller amygdalas or other brain functions. And once you're an adult and you're fully formed around your 30s and such, it's very unlikely that you can change these things. And so it really talked about the importance of the pro-social nature, the selflessness. Because if you're selfish and you have children, they're likely to become selfish as well, or maybe even psychopaths, or any other brain-stunted thing, because this isn't just limited to that. But I look forward to like finding more research and articles on like that. Which leads into the next thing, the effects of unconditional love. And what made me put this down to look into was just, have you ever known someone that just like did not want a dog or a pet? But I'm going to use dogs for the example. Excuse me. Because most dogs give unconditional love. And I could say many of you who have had a dog, some of you don't like dogs, and that's okay. But you can see the change that unconditional love will give in a person. And again, let's go back to that example I said of someone who did not want a dog, and then suddenly they have a dog or they have to watch a dog, and how they can change suddenly and just be like suddenly the dog's best friend, because unconditional love is just such a magical thing. Now this is unconditional love between two species who can only interact with each other on a limited level. When it comes to humans like you and I, unconditional love becomes kind of different. There is, and it goes into, unconditional love is generally love. Like you love no matter if someone messes up or someone just is not right for you. You don't like their looks, their sound, their whatever, but you still can love them. Conditional love would be, I will only love you if you do this thing, or if you look like this, or if you sound like this, or you messed up and I can't love you anymore. Sorry, I have conditions for my love for you. Now, in those things, that's not to say that unconditional love is toxic love, because you're not supposed to give like this unending, like overbearing love. That's not unconditional love. That's overbearing love or toxic love. Because you, again, as I said in one of the previous episodes, which again I cannot remember the philosopher who said this, but you cannot be loving without learning. You cannot be compassionate without wisdom. And you can't have much wisdom without compassion. Compassionacy? I'm not sure on that one. But you cannot be compassionate without wisdom. You cannot love without learning. Your love would be conditional if you are without boundary and such. That would still be conditional, but it's that balance of having no conditions, of being like, I still love you no matter what, but not using it as a bandage or as leverage and such. I hope that makes sense, because I have a lot here and I'm going to move on. One thing I came to, something that hit me during a character workshop for improv. And again, I think improv fits into life and philosophy very well because, again, it teaches us how to be present. And many of you think that, oh, it's about being funny. It has funny moments just as life has funny moments, but really it's just about being there and then kind of honing in on that. But the realization I had was insecurity leads to returning or resorting back to your natural character, as unnatural characters stand out, especially if amplified. And what I mean by that is, let's say that, like, you are putting on a mask, either real or metaphorical. You're trying to be a character. You're trying to be something else, right? You're trying to be cooler at let's use small examples. You're trying to be the cool guy at school, or you're trying to fit in somewhere that you might not fit in normally. You're trying to change your character. Insecurity will lead to you to go back to your natural state, because you are feeling unnatural. Now, if you feel natural in it, then that can be your character change. Like, you yourself can be stepping into that character and are now transferring yourself into that. You can, that is absolutely acceptable, because we are always in a constant change, which I will get into later. And especially if you're within an audience, emotions are transferable. And so your insecurities, you will see in the audience reaction. And I don't mean just like on stage audience, but I mean like when you're with a group and you're feeling insecure and being insecure, it will feed off into the people that you're around. Because, again, the unnaturalness of your character stands out, the insecurity, which will most likely lead you to resorting or returning back to normalcy, unless your character is to continue in your act. Kind of like, for example, using TV shows, George Costanza could not be caught in a lie, you know, and so he would continue his act for as long as he could until he was found out comedically. Next up, I have it written, symbolically, money talks, but it is not wise, intelligent, or intellectual. And what I mean by that is that money may charge things around, you know, and may people who have a lot of money can do a lot of things because, as the saying goes, money talks. But if you were to just take money, that money's not really doing anything. It itself is not wise, intelligent, or intellectual. It is the people behind it. And that's really all that statement is about. Next up, I have impossibility is an illusion of what you cannot currently imagine the possibility of being, resulting from not being. And what I mean by that is essentially, and this is going into theoretics and statistics, but when you break down infinity, just about anything and everything will fit within that infinity. Anything and everything is or should be theoretically possible. It's just the things that we believe are impossible right now are impossible because we cannot imagine it. We can't even consider it being a possibility. And it isn't until one is able to even imagine the possibility that then its likelihood increases of being. For example, for a small example, blue giraffes are very likely to not exist, right? But I just said it. You probably just pictured it. You could draw a blue giraffe. So even by me saying blue giraffe, it is still possible because it can be imagined. Something that I couldn't even express to you right now is the most impossible thing that we have, but can still eventually be thought by the future or experienced by the future. It's just we could not comprehend it right now. Just as, for example, 100 years to 200 years ago to even farther than that, they probably could not even comprehend the phones that we use or any technology that we use today. It would have been impossible for them to almost even describe it, but here we are using it today. What was once impossible can become possible. And further thoughts and philosophies on that. Next, I have written down, for many, it is not meaning or the funk or existence that they seek to understand, but to find what pleases them and works in their favor. Again, selfishness over selflessness. And though that is not what God or funk is, or how the natural balance of existence works, it is an attribute to the very same balance. We mission and no mission must exist to achieve and produce key mission. Jeez. I'm apologizing for all the burps. And what I mean by that is basically what I stated. For I can't even say most because that would be an assumption. For some people, they just want to hear what works for them. They say that feels good for me, and I'm set with it. I don't need anything else. If other things come, I'll accept them or not accept them. And that is okay. Because that is the balance, the natural balance of life and existence. And it is important for people like this to exist, to challenge others, to knowing more and to seeing their perspective and being like, and to consider it, and to expand from it, because they don't want to, and so someone or something must or will, or won't. It is all of these things. And for those who are just tuning in on this video, we mission is my term for essentially the yes and of reality. Basically, we mission is existence happening, like things are yes anding, like yes, we're continuing. No mission would be to cancel that out, to be like the alternate of that, which can also be a no but. And these are also things that can apply for any situation. We mission would be someone agreeing with you. No mission would be someone disagreeing with you. And key mission is the combination of the two sides of the same coin. The coin would be key mission, just the natural flow of things. This kind of continues on that last point. And again, I want to express that, and I'll probably express it after I say this again, that it is important for everyone to have their individualistic views, because that is what feeds the funk and the universe and teaches it what it's like to have those views or be those things, and how we can reach the next step in information of existence. But what I have here is choosing a singular religion, viewpoint, or ideology is like studying a single brick on the Great Wall of China. You're most likely only ever going to see one side of the wall, or even this one brick. You'll only vaguely be aware of your surroundings, what's behind you, that are within your scope and reach. So if you're only focusing on this brick, you'll only ever know what's in this area if you never move or go different locations. You'll never completely experience the entire wall or perhaps even yourself, because if you're so focused on this brick and learning this brick, you may not even learn who or what you are. Sure, this may be the life for some, but if we all did it, we would never know the entire world or the universe or truly understand the nature of funk. And again, that being said, I am not dismissing anyone who does do this, because again, it is important for someone to at least do that. But again, if we all did it, then we'd all just be focused on this one brick. It is important for us to each find a brick, some of us to study the whole wall, some of us to not even study the wall, some of us to go study a leaf in Egypt or something, to each their own. And the importance of that, the importance of being individuals in a collected consciousness, in a collected experience, because we are each appendages of funk, and it's important for us to be that, so that we can each learn from that. We can each look back on the past and create the future. With hand in hand with the future. I mean, we're not single-handedly forming the future, at least yet. The future is going to do its own thing as it comes to be. But it does help to look back and study the past. I think it was Kierkegaard who had the quote of the only way we can learn is by looking backwards as we move forwards. I may be shorthanding that quote a little bit, but I think that basically serves the purpose of. Continuing on in that thought, it is unlikely that you will be universally punished for not following a certain religion or ideology or viewpoint, but it is very likely that you will be by those who follow that religion or viewpoint. You will absolutely experience times of suffering in existence regarding anything. You are going to suffer. But those who are religious extremists and such will attribute to that suffering where there existently wouldn't be any, or hadn't been any in the first place. They will attribute that because they think they are doing the right thing. Which again, as I said, these things must happen. It's not good or bad. It's everything. It's all of it. You will feel or fear religious peer pressure because of humanity, not from the origin of existence. These are human thoughts and ideas and ideology of based on what we believe, where we're at in the past or now, depending on your traditions and all of these things. So then when it comes to moral rules that aren't made from religion or ideologies, just in general rules of morality, from experience what is just and is not just, again, outside of religion, things that have justice and things that don't have justice, things that are just and not just, until we can find what works. But even those decisions outside of religion and ideologies can still be corrupted. We still don't technically know what is just and what is not just. But we have those internal feelings. We have those funk feelings, and we decide them as we go. But then sometimes, again, they can be corrupted. As we go along, we could have had something that in the past worked and now does not work. But the people who gain power from it working in the past and still not working want it to not continue working until we decide that that is enough and that we need to change things. That's an incomplete thought that I have next. But if you want to look into it yourself, I'm asking, like, what is space? Like, what is the space between my hand and this hand? Like, if there's a dent in a chair, like someone scoops at a chair, that's an absence of the chair. Or if that chair was like that in the first place, like the wood had a hole in it, that's an absence of the tree, but it is an absence of the chair. I'm sure there's better arguments for this stuff. I meant to look into this one a little bit more, but I did not. My apologies. Again, that's why I present these here and put them in my treatise, so that when I'm going back through them, I can expand upon these ideas, look back into the research, and then present further ideas upon that in the future. As I think I talked about in my last video, that's something for my yaw of myself, my future version, the version of me that is not me right now. My yaw will look on that information and look back on this information and hopefully expand from it. Moving on. This is a revisit of, I think, something that I talked about in my first video, about not cutting your beard hair to showcase your growth within and of the funk. So, like, some religions do not shave, so it's to showcase your growth on in life. And I talked about the idea of this could be leading into vanity. And if, like, let's say that you're growing this beard and you have, like, a cancer underneath your beard, you wouldn't know it's there until perhaps it's too late because you have this beard. But listening to a podcast, a Muslim podcast actually, it answered that. They were talking about, like, if you begin to be vain about your growth in your beard, cut it off, get rid of it, because it's time for a new regrowth of experience. And I thought that was interesting, so I wanted to revisit that. Next, I have the Philosopher's Curse, which I covered a little bit on in the last video. This is the thing that, like, when you experience a new perspective, or you learn something new, or you have an idea that you want to ask others, and no one else wants to hear it. No one else will either believe you, or they'll challenge you to an extreme degree. That's the Philosopher's Curse. Again, to use the allegory of Plato's cave, anyone who leaves this cave and comes back with information saying that, hey, the shadows that we're seeing on this wall, now what I know to be called shadows, are actually being cast by the things and the people outside of this cave. All the people who stayed in the cave are going to be like, well, what the hell are you talking about? You're crazy. That is the Philosopher's Curse, of people just either listening or not, and they don't understand your perspective because they have not experienced your perspective. Something that I notice in people with the Philosopher's Curse is that they'll speak quickly and with passion so that they can get their ideas across, and that's used against them most of the time. Because, again, people that don't understand will choose any reason to not want to understand. They'll be like, oh, you're talking too fast, or oh, you're speaking, like, you sound manic, and I also thought it was interesting. I was listening to it just about every day. I try to listen to a different religion or ideologies podcast, and in one of the Jainism podcasts, the quote was, anything spoken out of passion is false. I think that was the ending quote, and I might have discussed that in the last episode of this. But that made me, like, really be like, what? Like, anything spoken out of passion is false? Because right now, I mean, I'm speaking out of a passion for philosophy, and this information and my theory and postulations of funk and how everything comes together. So does that mean that everything I'm saying is meaningless and a lie? And kind of yes and no. And I think that's so funny and fascinating. It's the philosopher's curse. But it is speaking a new language to someone who doesn't wish to translate a new language. Essentially, like, let's say you're speaking Spanish to someone who's racist, right? Like, they are not gonna want to hear it, and they're gonna tell you that. And I wrote down their martyrs of truth and philosophy, and I can't remember which philosopher said the quote, and I wish I had written down the exact quote. But essentially, she mentioned that every truth has a martyr. Because of this, again, she didn't mention the philosopher's curse, but I think it falls into that. There is the curse of the philosopher that seeks truth, and once they present that truth, they are martyred by their act of doing, until eventually the future is like, oh shit, I think they were onto something there. Or not, can go, again, as life goes, it goes any and all directions. There is no right, wrong, but we have feelings on and opinions on which. There are no answers, there are only suggestions. Leading on to some more words that came to me. And again, these words that come to me, I also find very fascinating and very Jungian, because it's just, as I've said, the funk provides. And when I'm looking, I'll be seeking a concept of like how to explain this, and these words will just come, and then I'll try to break down these words, and they just make sense. And I think that's mind blowing. The next word that I have coined is condibulence, or to be condibulant. And what that is the baiting of someone from another race, sex, religion, ideology, age, or etc. into making a mistake or doing wrong to someone or something else, especially to cause mischief or disrupt peace, especially if based upon beliefs. So, essentially, like, if you set someone up because of who they are, and you make them make a mistake so that they get in trouble, that is condibulence. You are being condibulant. Whether it's racist, sexist, ageist, any of those things. You are being condibulant. When you break that down, con means to persuade someone to do or believe something, typically by use of deception. Dib is to fish by letting the bait bob and dip on the surface. And eulant or eulence is abundant or full of. So again, you are conning someone by fishing them in and being full of it. It's crazy how these things just work together and build themselves. I've got some more phrases that came up, but next up I have there's the philosophical question and thought experiment of an almighty being able to create a mountain that it can and cannot lift. So like if you were to ask God or an almighty being, create something that create a mountain that you cannot lift, and if you can do that, then are you really almighty? My response to this, the original philosophical statement of this has three realities within that. One, it can lift the mountain. Two, it cannot lift the mountain. And three, the mountain never existed. But I think that if it was an almighty being, like a genuinely almighty being, it would be able to create a mountain that it could not lift until it needed to lift it. And so it's in that state of, no, I can't lift this mountain, even though eventually it could. And that leads back to, again, it's impossible until it's possible. It's in that superposition of state based on time and statistics and many other things. But there's also like other equations within that, like can the mountain lift itself, or is the mountain blue, or many other things that you can get into that. A word that was coined on the first draft of the treatise is Jkiulosp. That's Jkiulosp. This was a word that in the original forum, when I was first presenting this to the internet, that was someone's response. It was like, "Do you love Jkiulosp?" And I only pronounce it that way because when I put it in a like a computer, like it reads your words, and that's how it pronounced it. And what I eventually coined that to be, because when you break that down, it doesn't mean anything. But I eventually gave that the definition of the unknown investigating into itself and the unknown environment. And so when you are in a place that you do not know what is happening or going on, and you continue into that out of bravery or fear, you're Jkiulosping. You are investigating into the unknown. Or if you're investigating into yourself by meditation or philosophy or anything, you're Jkiulosping. I hope that makes sense. This came off of a philosophy podcast that I thought was fascinating. We'll see if you find it as fascinating as I do. But the quote was, and this comes from DeLuise, I believe, repetition serves in a sense to establish and maintain a certain space. The only way that you can move to a new space is by something that never repeats. And by you, it really anything. And the example that they gave in the podcast, to give it a metaphor and a picture of, is a squid moves by having an organ that pushes at water. It jets it out and pushes it to a new space. And this is sustainable because water cannot be compressed any further than it already is. So the stability of the water, or the metric repetition of, is the same level of pressure in the water and is what sustains the squid from moving place to place. And so the water is the repetition, and the squid is a part of that repetition, but it is able to push itself out because the water can't repeat any more than it already is. It's already compressed enough, and the squid is able to push more water against itself to move itself. And DeLuise, in this repetition stuff, he's really talking about music and stuff, but he also applies it to the universe. He talks about how the musical march, like Nazi marches and stuff, which were a part of his time, establishes and maintains the space, because marches are 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and they're very repetitive. And they establish the space in either audibly or in your head, like earworms. And jazz is what expands us into the next space, exploration, or the refrain. He uses the term refrain to escape, but I think jazz is a good key on that. So when we look at technology is only able to repeat what it is able to until it's expanded upon and expanded from. So like a wrench can only do what wrenches can do, and they'll keep repeating that until perhaps something creates a wrench that does more, or a wrench that can suddenly use Wi-Fi somehow, something to escape from the repetition and expand from it. And so if you notice how like a lot of modern and popular music is easy to follow and repetitive, like basically any single that you're going to hear on the radio, it's repetitive and an earworm so that it can establish the space within your head and not leave. It wants to play on repeat inside of yourself. And the only way to get out of that is to continue the refrain, which is very difficult for people. You would have to write your own end to that, which even then, it's so repetitive and tricky that it has already established the space. And it is very difficult to move beyond that. Buddhists would suggest a mantra to meditate and be able to clear your head. But for some, that is very difficult. And I continue with jazz challenges those limits and expands it into the unknown and sometimes uncomfortable. Again, challenge being the key word, because now that you have that repetition or a repetition, jazz would take you into the continuing refrain into an unknown territory. And for some, unknown territories are an anxious or scary experience. And it's going to challenge you to get into that experience. And some don't want to. They want to continue with the earworm that's in their head. Next up, this is a controversial topic, but I consider everyone and everything to be trans. I don't mean transsexual or transgender. Some people are transsexual and transgender, but to my definition, everyone and everything is within a transfer of all times in state. You are never the same thing now that you are now. You are completely different. Though very similar, you are a yaw of what your past self was. And your past self is now the yaw of you. In the words that I have down, I think everything can be described as transadal. Trans being across or beyond or into a different state. Add being moving to, changing into, an addition or increase. And all means on arrival. And so you're transferring into a different arrival, which we are doing in every state or every Caravanic state. And again, to explain what Caravania is, it is the frames of reality. Like if animation is done with pictures, imagine that, but for all of existence, breaking that down into the Planck state, the smallest fractions of frames of existence. We're moving into each of those at every Planck moment. Then there's intratransadal. Intra means inside, within, so you're transferring inside yourself, whether it be outside or inside a internal change. Transantal, anti means before or preceding. Transoveral, over meaning excessively or completely, or overconfident, overburdened, or overjoyed. So basically, just completely trans, or even more so. Dia, so like dia transantal would be like, dia means through or across, and so that would be going through the before or preceding transfer. Duo is twice, trio is thrice, etc. And then pan would be all. So you could be pan transadal, essentially, meaning you're transferring throughout the all. Again, all of these will be in my treatise that you can try to make more sense. Again, I'm just slightly covering them in this video so that they can be expanded upon later. And the last thing that I have for you today is another word that came to me in a dream that I did not have a definition for a while until I finally broke it down online, which was Zorstary, which was a word that just came to me as I was waking up in a... now I'm forgetting the word. Hypnagogic state. And so hypnagogia is the state right before sleep or dreams or when you're coming out of them. Edison and Dolly used to use hypnagogic states. They would hold a spoon as they were going to sleep, and they would hold it off the bed so that they would enter hypnagogia, and when they fell asleep, they would drop the spoon and it would wake them up, and they would write down all their ideas and all the things that they experienced in hypnagogia. It's kind of like a form of meditation and tripping, but it's dreams. It's your own head. And so the word Zorstary came to me. Z being an abbreviation for the zenith distance, or zero, or the zone. It's also a symbol for the unknown quantity of an unknown quantity or variable, or an impedance. Orst is a name meaning idealism, intuition, romance, generosity, creativity, wisdom, and tolerance. And airy means of, related to, or belonging to. And so when you put all of these together to get Zorstary, Zorstary is the actualization of potential. And a word, it's the commentary and the follow-up to a word that I believe Aristotle, either Aristotle or Socrates or Plato, one of these three, they're teachers of each other. I think it's Aristotle. He coined the term entelechy, which is the realization of potential, that potential can happen. Whereas Zorstary is the actualization of this potential. The idealism, the intuition, the romance, the generosity, all of these things put together, and the distance of these things, or the zone of, the actualization of these potentials. And that is all I have for y'all today. Now that this video is done, I will be putting all these things in my treatise, and that will be the full third draft of this long document in writing that I started December 2019. And again, the writing in the treatise started then, but the history of all these informations and what's going into it started much before that, and will continue long after its existence. Thank y'all for being here. If you're still here, or really anytime, if you checked in and checked out, thanks for being here. That's unconditional love. I do love each and every one of you. Thanks again for listening. I don't want to drag this on too long like I normally do. Y'all take care, and look for the upcoming treatise either online. It's always free because I believe this information should be free and available to everyone. But if you want a physical copy, those should be out hopefully this month. So let me know if you're interested or not, because I'll probably only print like one or two unless people are interested. Then I'll get you your own personal copy. Thanks again for being here. Y'all take care. Have a great day. Have a great life. And you will and you won't. Love you. Bye-bye.